Hello, and welcome to Culture by Numbers and another episode of where data geeks meet pop culture and we dive deep into ways that marketers, data scientists, and tech practitioners use data to explain how things work. Today, we have a special AI episode featuring Lee Gaul, whom I met at a recent New York AI meetup. And Lee is an expert in AI technology as a principal consultant of Long Horizon AI and a recognized thought leader in the space. He's written countless articles about understanding whether computers can actually reason and is known for helping companies to explore the real world impact, challenges, and possibilities of this transformative field. Beyond his work in tech, he's a passionate reader and literacy advocate, featured in hit podcast Sold a Story by the American Public Media. And today, one of the things that really inspired me to reach out to Lee was that he talked about an MIT study about how brains process AI and how humans are the worst for it because we lack critical thinking. And there was also a recent Apple study which challenges what reasoning is and how AI models rank. So I'm really
Mhm.
pleased to have you here today. Thank you for joining us, Lee.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. I'm so happy to be here today. And yeah, I think you and I obviously are both super sort of plugged into the AI space. And so I think when we met, we sort of connected right away. You were mentioning a new agent that had come out, and I immediately balked at it, but in a kind of like fun way, and that got a conversation going. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know a lot of brands and advertisers and corporate folks are struggling and straddling how they're going to use AI in their day to day, not only to transform their business processes, but to help them with productivity and efficiency and thinking. And I think that when we first met, Grok had just done a Twitter stream of hate and all kinds of controversial outputs. And so, what are some of the important reasons developments about AI that are top of mind for you these days in terms of any risks or the rise of sycophancy?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Grok is just another example and now an ever-growing line of issues that we're seeing ever present in language model-based AI systems like ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude and Grok. And I think one of the things that I really try to do when I give my presentations about AI is explain to people who may not really understand how they actually work a little bit more insight about that. And even people who are AI engineers and data scientists and things like that maybe aren't fully aware of how the systems actually do what they do. And so when you start to understand that, it's really pretty obvious that these types of behaviors happen. So with OpenAI's GPT-4o model, Sam Altman had tweeted saying, "Hey, we're going to release a bunch of great updates. It's going to make the user experience a lot better." And what they ended up seeing was what they called glazing, which is basically the AI being like, "Oh, you're so smart. Whoa, amazing. I can't, oh, you think the earth is flat? What a brave and creative concept. And you should, people aren't on your level." It was really, really like being sycophantic. And so, sycophancy being the tendency to hide your true intentions in order to kind of gain favor, essentially. And why it's not a big surprise for me and people who really understand how these systems work is, they're trained on human preference and feedback. And so one person who's hired to grade the responses for, say, GPT-4o, they may not overtly go, "Oh, I'm only going to pick the answers that are really flattering." But in aggregate, the general tendency for a human being to choose the more flattering response is going to compound until you have things like the glazing or sycophancy. I think OpenAI just didn't want to give any sort of traction to that word, but that's really what was happening there is they increased sycophancy. And at the end of the day, it's all the post-training things that happen in AI models that we end up seeing a lot of the problems. And Grok was a great example where I'm not sure there's any real confirmation on this. They've had their explanations about it, but I think the real explanation is you get somebody from the top, like Elon Musk specifically saying, "Hey, what's going on with this chat model? How come it's, acting so woke? How come it's saying left-leaning ideas and opinions about the world, fix it. And what they did was they created a system prompt, which essentially is a barrier between the user and the base model, telling it, hey, before you answer anything, take into account what Elon wants. He doesn't like left-leaning answers, so be as provocative as you want to be and give answers that aren't along the mainstream. And I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember Tay, but that was a chatbot that Microsoft released many years ago now. It was an AI chatbot, and they released it onto Twitter. And by the end of the day, it was the most vile 4chan sounding character on Twitter. And it's because a lot of the people on Reddit and then 4chan got wind that they had released this thing that was essentially updating its weights in real time based on the interactions that it was having. And it ended up adopting all these really terrible, problematic kind of opinions and answers and stuff. So pretty wild. Yeah.
Well, no, I think the only bot that I remember from Microsoft was Clippy. It was like a
Yeah.
paper clip on the side of
Right.
Office applications that would come out and give static recommendations with some sort of animation. But yes, in terms of sycophancy, I've also read in the Wall Street Journal and other trades that it's part of the reason why people love to talk to their chatbots
Hmm.
because it's even more trusted than your significant other because they never argue with you. They're very informative. So there's absolutely validation that models do tend to say what you expect them to say. And the example you gave about Elon Musk is also an example of the need for a human in the loop for
Yeah.
all of the annotations and so on. But so the current race for AI supremacy is akin to the Renaissance period when every town was building a higher cathedral to show that they were bigger, better, faster,
Mm,
and all of that. And
yeah.
I think recently DeepMind came out. Google announced that they had won the gold medal designation at the 2025 International Math Olympiad, but they were actually endorsed by the IMO as opposed to OpenAI rushing to make an unofficial announcement. So it's a classic tale of sort of all of these models trying to prove that they're better than the rest. But do you have any examples of how AI agents and the existence of hallucinations can be measured or used successfully in business with production level quality?
Yeah, sure. And I like to actually address kind of two of the points here. And I think the first one is this race for AI supremacy. That's a term that I use. I'm not sure if it's super widely adopted yet, but when I think of quantum supremacy, which is essentially whoever is able to create a quantum computer that can function with minimal loss and errors with X amount of qubits, well, then they've reached quantum supremacy. And so I think, there's been a battle going on there. DeepMind has kind of been winning that as well. But I think of that language being really, appropriate for the AI race. And I think not all model developers are equal, and not just talking about capability standpoint, but just their philosophy, right? So I think OpenAI is the worst offender when it comes to really exhibiting that they just want to win at all costs. So, you mentioned the gold medal IMO. 1 a.m. a few weeks ago, OpenAI tweeted that their model had gotten the gold medal in IMO, and no model had done that before. Google's model last year, which wasn't a pure language model, got a silver, and so they really wanted to rush and for a day or so, they had kind of won the narrative around this big breakthrough. And I mean, it turns out that they actually answered the questions on the IMO, but they didn't officially join the competition, and they weren't officially recognized. But they had heard that Google DeepMind's model was officially a gold medal winner, and so they rushed out this announcement, and at the detriment of the students who actually competed in that. Right? IMO asked everyone that was AI competitors to wait at least a week so that they could have their commencement ceremony and their ceremony and then celebration and all of that. So they didn't take the wind out of the sails of any of these hardworking students that got really amazing scores on this test. And they just really didn't care. They wanted to control the narrative. And companies like DeepMind are much more thoughtful in the way that they approach releases and have very robust frameworks about safety and all the rest of it. And OpenAI just really wants to win. And I've been saying for years now that winning AI is the worst way to look at it, right? But the reason that's important, and this kind of dovetails into the second point that you're asking about, is the public and business owners. They hear all of this hype and they think to themselves like, well, then I should be able to use this to literally revolutionize my business. People, leadership at the top, and people that are part of the board and all of that, I must be thinking like, wow, we could reduce headcount so much, and our overheads and our profits will just go through the roof. And so they're sort of rushing to implement systems and agents across the board. And I think the reality is I'm somebody that is constantly monitoring the AI world. The real killer AI agent demo doesn't exist. And in fact, the presentation that I gave on June 11th or 12th, was about how we actually don't live in the world of AI agents. Everyone said last year and even this year continuing to say 2025 is the year of the agent. Well, by definition, they're not. Even by Google and OpenAI's definitions, we're not dealing with agents right now. So it's interesting. Actually, I do have a slide that talks a little bit about some of those definitions of the different companies. So I'm going to show that with you, show that to you here in a second,
That's
because I
great.
think
Yeah,
it's interesting to me that these companies that at one time are saying, hey, we're building agents, we're really excited about agents. They're not building, even by their own definition, what an agent is. So Google, they call an AI agent an autonomously and proactively system that can perform tasks. Can perform complex multi-step actions, learns and adapts, and can make decisions independently, and is proactive and goal-oriented. That's Google's. OpenAI's agents are systems that independently accomplish tasks on your behalf. IBM, agent refers to a system or program that is capable of autonomously performing tasks on the behalf of the user or another system, designing its workflow and utilizing available tools. Yeah. AI agents solve complex, multi-step, goal-driven tasks autonomously. For task complexity that is moderate to high, they are proactive. The autonomy is high, independent, and it's based on planning and reasoning. And the learning ability learns from interactions and adapts over time. Actually, no system is an AI agent by this definition today. There's zero actually. And if you look at the other definitions that all of these companies put out, an AI assistant simplifies tasks based on user commands. It does low to moderate. It's reactive. Same with Google. An AI assistant assists users with tasks, responds to requests or prompts, provides information, completes simple tasks, can recommend actions, but the user makes the decisions. I mean, this is actually by definition what we have now, not agents. And so um, maybe that's fine. Maybe the average person out there at a business is going, I don't care what it's called. I don't care what the definition is. We need agents right away. And so we can kind of talk about the definitions or whatever. But I mean, I'm making the argument that really AI agents, even by the definition of the companies that are claiming to have them, um, don't exist currently. And I'm not sure how long it's going to be before we do have those. So I think that's an important example of how what gets through mostly is the hype. And that's why OpenAI found it so important to win that narrative that they had made this big breakthrough, is because attention is the currency. And attention, marketers and advertisers, they know that attention is really the name of the game. It's key to every bit of success that you have. And these companies understand that as well. So they really want to capture that mind share and make sure everyone thinks of them as the undisputed leader in the space. And that's to all of our detriment, not only in the short term, but in the long term. It's to our detriment.
I think all of these brands are trying to compete to understand the fundamental question we've been asking here in this episode is, can computers actually reason? Can they understand?
Hmm.
And is it a sentient type of system? And we certainly come a long way from the
Yeah.
hype around, you mentioned IBM, and I remember Watson and when it beat the Jeopardy champion and
Hmm.
everyone was fascinated with the fact that this machine could beat and answer any question in Jeopardy format. And
Hmm.
then, of course, with Google DeepMind, when they beat the South Korean expert
Lisa Dahl.
with the Go game, that was another breakthrough. But, those were games and interactive questions, and we've
Hmm.
evolved now into trying to understand, RAG and reality augmented generation, and can AI actually understand enough to help with some human tasks that can
Yeah,
be outsourced. And thankfully, with the IMO, 28 high school students still outranked both DeepMind and OpenAI. So,
yeah,
although I think the top scorer said he wasn't sure about next year.
yeah,
He
yeah,
thinks that these AI systems could actually beat the teenagers.
yeah,
But I guess so. Tell me a little bit about how what applications can be used in business for production level quality. I mean,
yeah,
I think OpenAI just came out with a summary of emails, or was that Google? That it can actually summarize your emails now and then start
yeah.
scheduling. It starts to act like an assistant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I think it's interesting. Like, for me to answer what systems, people can or should use, I mean, that is kind of what I do professionally is, and some part of it is helping businesses to understand where the opportunities are with AI. But I think to step back and do a little bit more of a kind of high level discussion around that is, again, getting back to this idea of who the winners of AI are going to be. And I think it's so frustrating to use that term, but I think what we can do is say who's really going to be competitive in the AI space. And for my money, it's still a company like Google. And the reason I say that is, I mean, there's many reasons. First of all, they've sort of made all of the important innovations in AI that anyone is talking about or gaining traction from right now, with the exception of some novel training techniques that, because of open source and open weight models, a lot of independent researchers have been able to do some amazing stuff and figure out, LoRa, which is low rank adaptation, or RLVR, which is reinforcement learning from verified results, and like these different kinds of things there. But at the end of the day, Google, they invented the transformer. They've invented chain of thought, and they've invented test time compute. They've, been the only ones to really actually create new math and science using their AI prowess and research. But more than that, they're vertically integrated. Google has their TPUs, which are like GPUs, but they're actually better at AI related tasks because they were designed for tensor. And so they have just more compute than anybody, and it's their own compute. They're not relying on anybody else. They use NVIDIA for things, but the TPUs drive everything that they do. They have the Google ecosystem, from the Android mobile phone and mobile OS to the deep integrations with your Gmail, your Google Drive, your calendar, your YouTube. All of these things they have already, and they also have just data like nobody else. And so that's a big part of it. But you mentioned summarizing emails. Look, I've been able to summarize emails in Gmail for many months now. I'm a beta tester, and so I do get access to things early, but anybody can be. But, I've been able to click on a button to summarize my emails for a long time, as well as go, I want to schedule a follow-up meeting, and I have integrated in my browser Gemini. So Gemini is in my Chrome browser. Again, they have Chrome, right? They have all of these different things. So actually, for me, I use AI. I use all kinds of different models, and I like to understand what's out there and all the rest of it. But that's experimenting. That's being interested in what's happening. What's impacting my daily is Google and their deep integration of AI in their systems. And then look, Meta with my Meta smart glasses. These are the two places for me on a daily basis that I am finding value and efficiencies with AI. And many people use ChatGPT, and you go into a browser and you chat with it, and that is very cool and very powerful. And that's what all the kind of AI powered chatbot developers have. But what they have less of is this deep integration that Google has. And
I
so,
think that that's a really great point
yeah,
because it is a little bit insidious. I have to say, I did start out using ChatGPT and Claude for chat related queries and research as
Hmm.
an independent standalone tool. And then I started to use ChatGPT for images. But now I have a Notion and a Fathom and an Otter note taker, which I did create an agent using NA to take all my Fathom summaries and put them into a Notion tab.
Yeah.
But I would love to integrate my emails and into a Google Calendar and then
Hmm.
use Google Pay to sign up for an event. It'd be great to have a meetup that also was integrated. So I am starting to veer more towards using Gemini and Chrome. So having that ecosystem is really powerful because you start from point solutions into this integrated ecosystem and it becomes sort of ever present,
Well, here
omnipresent.
yeah, we're in an Apple moment actually.
I was gonna say, I think
Yeah.
Apple is the dark horse, right, in all of
Well,
this.
but also, I mean, we're in an Apple moment in the sense that, they, from the very beginning, made the hardware and software piece the main value proposition. And to this day, people won't switch from iPhone because everything is integrated with their iPhone, and they look down on people with Android phones. I'm always been an Android person,
Me
but
too.
if you have a green bubble, there's literally this techno classicism that exists because people are so not only status driven by their mobile device, but they've been hooked in by that idea that there's this, ecosystem, and it's like, oh, it's the ecosystem, like I got to have my iCloud with my mail and my iMessage, and it just all works, and that's great.
Yeah.
Well, we're in that same moment with AI now, where who else can really do that Apple move in the age of AI? And it's only Google. And so, I mean, it's one thing to shatter benchmarks and be the hero on Twitter for a week about what model you've released and how much better it is from the next one. And it's quite another to have your mother-in-law saying, "Oh, I asked Gemini and it just kind of helped me do it," right? At the end of the day, that's what really matters, is that the seamless integration of AI in a subtle way over time, it will tell you who the winner is. And so there is one way to win in this, and it's not by winning to get to the, AGI level model. It's providing and disseminating and really kind of democratizing AI in everyone's lives. And so the people who own the data and the hardware and the software are going to win it, and that's Google every time. And there's really, only nerds and certain, people in the AI bubble really care what model got the best benchmark, or who's beating the ARC challenge or any of that. Most people don't even know any of that stuff. What they do know is like, oh yeah, I saw Gemini in my email and it told me what the email was about without me having to read it. That's amazing. I'm just using that now, and you see the numbers of amount of tokens processed month over month by Google, and it's in the trillions.
Yep, yep. I can't count the number of times that I've been judged by iPhone snobs when they asked if I could FaceTime, and I said, "I can't FaceTime because I have an Android
Yeah,
phone."
yeah,
But Google is the only FAANG company that has become iconized with the verb Googling, like,
yeah,
Xerox was Xerox,
yeah,
so that really tells you something about the cultural moment of
yeah.
Google kind of having this ecosystem. But that said, Meta just came off a tremendous quarterly earnings review.
Hmm.
Mark Zuckerberg has gone on the page saying that he's building this super intelligence team, and they recently paid $15 billion for a stake in Scale AI for its
Hmm.
annotation service.
Yeah.
So, do you see the value in that? And, what is annotation to begin with, just for our listeners who
Yeah, no, so I mean, it's an interesting question. And I think Meta is um I have a lot of thoughts about Meta and the AI space, and most of them are good. But the ones that aren't are really bad. But annotation services are really companies that specialize in taking really unstructured data and providing annotations for it. And the classic example is like if you wanted to train an AI model on what the difference between an apple was and another object, or to just identify an apple, then you would have to feed it a bunch of images and then an annotation going apple, red apple, blue apple, but red apple,
Yeah.
yellow apple, green apple. And that's annotation in a very kind of simple way. Scale AI is a company that from a broader sense prepares training data, acquires training data, and then sells or leases that data to model developers and people who are building and fine tuning their own versions of models. And so it shows that Meta is very serious. Scale has been a big player, and I think maybe they just wanted to buy them before they thought maybe somebody else would buy them. Um, but where
Why
it
is it
sort of,
important, though, to have annotation?
well, I
Is
mean,
it for inference and training, or is it
it
more?
can be for all kinds of different things. It can be for pre-training, but but mostly it's for post-training stuff. And I think, Scale doesn't really just do one specific thing, but they really do mainly kind of acquire training ready data, or they provide training ready data. So they can basically take a lot of different kinds of data and make sure that it's in just the type of format that AI models like and understand best, right? Or that match the different use case for the end user or the buyer of that data. And so it shows that Meta is planning on training, and they're planning on training on a bunch of really high quality data. That's interesting to me, but also it shows kind of a tale of two cities, right? Because Jan LeCun is the head of FAIR, which is Meta's research arm, their AI research. He is brilliant, and he's one of the so-called godfathers of AI. And he has truly been over Transformers for almost since they came out, because I think he has rightly identified the fact that what we're seeing right now is really people taking it to the max, what you can get out of a large language model. They're doing really sophisticated post training. They're training these models on examples of people thinking through a problem, and training out so many that the model can essentially go, okay, I know that this is the kind of thinking that I was trained on, so I'm going to find that kind of thinking and apply it to this maybe just very slightly different kind of problem, but they can't come up with new ideas. And I think that's, at the end of the day, it's because they can't learn much beyond what is captured in already existing thought, right? They're not using it to generalize and create new ideas. And so, um, Zuckerberg and the superintelligence team are doing is essentially buying data companies that will train that kind of model still. Whereas Jan LeCun has been thinking very deeply for quite a long time on a theory of mind and a way to build AI systems based on theory of mind. And one way he's been looking at doing that, and his team been looking at doing that, is by building models that can actually understand, plan, and predict things outside of their training data. So there's this architecture called JEPA, and it stands for Joint Embedding Predictive Architecture. And really what it does is it's able to essentially predict the next result based on unseen sort of information, right? So they'll train it on a bunch of kind of incomplete bits of data, and it can predict what's happening in the next scene, or the next action, or the next sort of a vector that would be a part of that solution space. It's learning to do that without any prior knowledge, right? And the reason I bring this slide up is it's this funny meme talking about, you could look at the little boy as OpenAI or Claude, Anthropic Claude, or any of the language model based systems. And, oh, my model can't generalize out of distribution, or it can't come up with similar um, things to solve based on its existing data. And so I said, well, we'll train it until there is nothing left out of distribution. We're basically saying, look, we'll train it until there's nothing that you haven't seen before, so that you can access any of those things that you've been trained on, and so that you don't have to generalize. You just have all the data in the world. And so essentially, that's the kind of the main point about what Meta is really planning on doing right now. Is they want to just train it on as much data as they can so that it can win all those benchmarks. And in fact, Meta was caught fudging benchmark performances when they released Llama 4 a couple of months ago now, which was a total failure.
Mhm.
And it goes to show that they've kind of been doubling down on that. They hit a wall. So people say there's no wall. Well, they're the best example of, look, if you look at the four major model developers out there, let's say five, but I don't even like to consider Grok part of the conversation. They're not the same. Anthropic, Google, OpenAI, and Meta. Meta, they hit the scaling wall. So you can essentially say that 25% of the model developers out there have now hit that scaling wall when it comes to data. They're a crazy example of that. And it shows that we need to move beyond just these kind of text-based systems if we want to really have things that meet the definitions of agents. Like I kind of talked about earlier on, you're not going to get an agent that is going to be able to really generalize outside of anything until they're able to be autonomous. And they're only going to be able to be autonomous if they can meet a situation that they've never seen before and still figure out a way to solve the problem.
Right.
And that's kind of the point. So, but that's all. That doesn't mean that I'm saying that businesses shouldn't be using AI or thinking about AI. I think that you should, but I also think, gosh, if you don't have a team that understands at least a little bit of this, the reality of what's going on here, you're going to be very susceptible to hype, and you're going to probably get sold on something that's actually going to be a lot more brittle than you thought it was. It's not going to be quite as safe for your customers as you thought it was. It's not going to be quite as useful or reliable for your internal teams as you thought it was. So what we need to kind of do is I want to start flipping the narrative, um, from this kind of human in the loop that we always talk about. And I think people need to start thinking about it as AI in the loop, where, look, Sonny, you have a process that you do at work and you're bringing AI into the loop, help you in certain parts. And it does a wonderful job, and it helps reduce time and create efficiency and make you more productive. But you're bringing it into your loop. It's not, AI bringing us into it. And that's the way to think about it. And that's how businesses should say, look, how can we bring AI into the loop on these processes that we have? And that really changes the mindset and also the kind of way that you think about solving these problems. And that's why companies really need a head of AI. They need an AI strategist. They need people who are thinking about and following what's happening in this space. Because if anybody out there is listening to this and is nodding their head, but going like, gosh, I didn't know that, then you need people on your team to help you guide decisions that are really going to actually help you be competitive instead of just feeling like you're getting major FOMO and missing out on the AI move.
Love that analogy of not just taking the human in the loop, but flipping it back and saying that AI needs to be in the human loop. Because I thought where you were going with the scale AI and the annotation is that you still need humans to give additional tweaking and direction to various models because they have that cold start problem. It may seem as though computers are reasoning, but actually they need more human annotation to describe whether this is a good analogy or a bad analogy. And so that continuous reinforced learning was one of the charts that I thought you did an excellent job of explaining exactly what AI does. It'll make an assumption, and then there's a continuous loop of training where the annotation can help. But this brings me to another question, which is that when businesses are thinking about creative projects in advertising or brand marketing, there's certainly a need for humans to guide the automation creative processes. I mean, there's so many tools now from Midjourney to OpenAI's Sora and Gemini's Veo and Meta's Ads Planner to create images and videos, even with audio, but still you need to have a prompt that
Hmm.
guides these tools. So, where
Yeah.
can enterprises apply digital transformation informed by AI agents?
Yeah. I mean, so again, I think this is the right kind of question to ask. I think, especially in the creative landscape, this is where we have seen lots of improvement in capabilities, not necessarily new capabilities, but huge improvement in capabilities. The moment for me in AI was really DALL-E,
Mhm.
the image generation model. Even back when it was creating, by comparison now, really terrible images, it actually was very impressive to go, I'm going to write a prompt and I'm just going to tell it what the image that I want is, and it's going to do that. Like, that's insane to me. That is insane. I can't believe that some of these models nowadays are so good at creating these. But at the end of the day, if you don't know how to explain what you want to see, you're not going to be super effective. And I think I actually want to pull up a tweet of mine that's a response to something else. So yeah, just give me a second here. I'm going to bring this up because I think it's really could be very useful. And I'm actually going to be giving. I'm in the process of writing um, a an article with a friend of mine. But this his name's Nate, and he's from Soft Hands Marketing. I saw this tweet, and it was a Google Imagen V4 Ultra from Gemini app.
Wow.
Um, and here's the results, right? So here's this woman, and look, it's this woman, and it looks very realistic. And you look at the different
That
types
was the
of
prompt.
things. Right. This is the problem. Look how
It looks
far it
like a
goes.
JSON.
Right. It is JSON. So what I did is I took this prompt, I copied it, and then I went in and I changed some of the different descriptors. And I was like, I want this to be an old Muppet man in a plaid jacket.
Mhm.
So like what it did was my thing. Yeah. Okay. I took that prompt, and instead of a young East Asian woman in a bright t-shirt, I was like elderly Muppet based character wearing a plaid suit jacket, holding a coffee cup. Um, the results here are amazing, right? This image is great, but I didn't come up with the JSON or the structure to be able to create that. But what people should be doing is researching about what it takes to create a really compelling image. Because if you can find a really great structured prompt and then put that into an AI model. So I put it into Gemini and I said, here's a great image prompt that's in JSON. I want to take this image or take this prompt and actually use it to create a character from a book I'm reading. And I'm currently reading Neuromancer by William Gibson. And there's one character named Molly in it. And then the 2 pages, he writes a description. So I took a picture of it on my phone of those 2 pages open. And I uploaded it into Gemini. I said, using this prompt, create an image of this character. And it read the pages of the picture that I took, prompt template, and then created a wonderful example of what this character looks like just based on some pretty simple clever things. I didn't have to reinvent the wheel and go, okay, it wants to look like this, because anyone who's used a text to image model like Dolly or Imagen, but you never get the right thing on the first try, or if you do one time, you, it's rare you get the right image on every one. I'm very picky, so I'll get an image and I go, no, this looks
Yeah.
like any other AI slop image out there. Please give it the gravity of a New York Times or a Wall Street Journal or Washington Post or PBS or, some major, whatever news
Caricature.
outlet and some kind of publication that's got a lot of gravity and create a very good image based on that. I don't like to use AI images, but I find in my Substack, you can really create a very you should create a really custom image for the article. So I've been doing that and I just go, no, that's not good enough. Please give it some gravity, make it photorealistic and you can get what you want out of them over time. But if you learn to say, hey, here's generally what I want. Here's a picture of what I want. Create me a meta prompt in JSON output for a text to image model that explains this. You can get great results. Agencies need to understand and creatives need to understand that um, to do really great stuff in AI, you still need to understand the basics of creating framing a great picture, of composition, of lighting, of use of color, of use of, all these kind of different dynamics and angle of camera. And, if it's motion within the frame, a character entering from one side of the frame to the other creates positive movement for the character. These are filmmaking things that most people don't know, but the creatives out there are really powerful if they can leverage that understanding and say, here's what I want it to look like, and here's exactly how I want it to be.
Yeah,
You
I
get some
think,
pretty amazing
I pretty
results.
much just stop at choosing between photorealistic and cartoon. That's my
Yeah,
big divide. But
yeah,
that's interesting because now a prompt can actually be you can enter in a script and it could possibly create the whole image from the script itself. So big studios like Disney can create cartoon characters based on descriptions of the character
hmm
and any other storytelling. It does come down to still having that storytelling outline, not only for ads and video commercials, but, full length features as well. I guess, are there any watch outs or what are you excited about building these days? And where do you see agents? sort of taking off?
Yeah. So right now I've got, it's a cliche. It's sort of embarrassing, but I do have a couple of things in stealth mode. One is an agent product. Ironically enough, if you don't know me or if you've only seen me talk once about agents, you may think that I'm this person who doesn't believe in them and I'm anti, but quite the contrary. If you understand what they're good for, I think it's great. I'm working right now on potentially launching an agent system. Gonna try and concentrate on a specific vertical because why not? And kind of go from there. So I'm really excited about that. And other than that, I do love doing some vibe coding. I've also gotten into doing sort of AI assisted creative writing. I have a short story that I wrote using Gemini that is really good. And I'm a big reader and I'm a bit of a reading snob. Like I don't like bad writing. I don't know if I don't like bad writing. I really like good writing and I read lots of books and I'm really surprised at the results that I've been able to get with some of the creative writing. And so I'm thinking about publishing the short story because I just think it's that good. Um, and then,
It'll be great because there's a whole genre of fan-based fiction, for example. So the whole Marvel universe has tons of fans. We just came off Comic-Con, and it's amazing to see what creators can put on YouTube based on redoing Star Trek episodes.
yeah,
And so now this really enables a whole different creator economy. It's not just the how-to video
yeah,
and on the TikToks and whatnot, but fiction based on characters. So that's wonderful that you're creating a short story. I myself published an AI poetry book based on my dad's poetry book. So the original
yeah.
one was something he published, and then I modified it
That's
using
amazing.
AI. And some of the
Yeah,
results, I mean, you can't tell the difference really between AI generated and human generated.
yeah,
So
yeah,
this is hearkening to a new era and renaissance of creativity that's combining human and AI generated content to the point where you can create more derivative stories than you ever had been. I
yeah.
wonder if there'll ever be a Mad Libs with AI because then you can choose your own storyline and have an animation or
Yeah,
output.
I mean, look, I was going to mention, I think, I myself was in love with choose your own adventure stories when I was a
Mhm.
kid. And I was delighted by even some of the Netflix choose your own adventure stories, where you can really just kind of, pick the next decision of what they're going to do in the show. There was a great Black Mirror one called Bandersnatch, which was very scary and dark and funny and kind of irreverent. And I think it's now finally off Netflix. But this idea of being able to kind of dynamically create the story and have it
I didn't
unfold.
know that.
Yeah.
How does it interact
Well, I mean, it's not like procedurally generated. It's just you basically pick several different options on the story
for
and
the
click on
next
the remote,
episode?
and it makes the decision in that moment where they kind of show you this way versus that way, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and we're only getting closer to that now. I mean, like with Notebook LM, when you can upload a bunch of different source documents and have it do the deep dive. You can do a live deep dive with them where you can ask the questions during the thing and it'll dynamically answer your question about whatever's going on and integrate it into the podcast. And like that is dynamically generated content. And we're getting to a point where sooner than later, we need to be thinking about what we want to see from a story perspective because the limitations are not going to be there anymore. So that's again like it's as much the dynamite use cases that are important right now as technology itself. It's the thing that people come to me most with. What are the use cases? What can I do? What are my use cases I should use for this? Um, from a creative standpoint, I think to be, we need to definitely double click as an industry on the creative part. What are some of the experiences that are going to be happening in 2 years? A lot of people aren't used to getting that weird in their thinking. A lot of people are not used to getting that esoteric in their thinking. I think that's why I call my consultancy Long Horizon AI. You really need to look long term. In one of my Substacks, I write about how, OpenAI was surprised by China again and that they shouldn't have been because China, by all sort of, you know, general consensus, has a 100-year grand strategy that they are, in the middle of, that started in 1949 and really goes till 2049. They've been thinking very
Yeah,
long
it's
term.
5 centuries of strategy.
Well, right. But I mean, the thing is the fact that there's even like a new specific kind of that they think in these long epochs of time, right? In this different time scale. We need to start thinking beyond quarterly profits to what are the experiences that are going to be happening in a year or 2 years from now? Because that's actually the transformative thing. And I think if companies and organizations and agencies don't have a team that's seriously thinking about that right now, you're going to be left behind. It's not like, oh, we didn't adopt ChatGPT back 22s to types. It's going to be like, oh gosh, we didn't think about all the different kind of situations we want people to be able to navigate when they think about our brand or service or ideas or whatever it is. We got to start thinking weird because it's going to get very interesting very fast. So it's a time for more creativity and not less creativity. And people, I feel, are a bit disheartened by the creative prowess of these models. You need to remember that they're tools, and we're just getting better and better tools. And what can't we do when we have access to these kinds of tools? It's going to be incredible. And it's for I think this may be the one prediction I get wrong, but I think it's always going to matter that a human made something versus a machine. I think it's always going to matter. I think that's why people care about art and creativity and different things is because there's a person's experience behind that. In the same way that when somebody buys something from another company, they really are buying it from the person that
Piece of
sold it to
yourself.
them, and you're buying what represents many people who are working behind the scenes to make up this thing. It's really just a name for a bunch of people doing a thing, right? And so people are still going to matter, and I think we just need to really lean in hard to our own creativity and abilities in that way. So,
So, one final question that you talk about the long term horizon, and children are the future. You could argue that kids have the most outrageous imaginations when they come up with stories and children's books and
mhm.
dreams that are truly imaginative. How will the integration of AI creativity in education and learning, how they read and write and create stories, do you think will impact how they learn and share stories and create stories in the future?
Yeah. So, I have an 11-year-old daughter, and um, you know, for over a year, I think, we had created a series of characters, a girl with a dog and a cat, and there are these called the Misty and Max stories. And we used AI to make these stories. And I would tell her a different bedtime story every night, a brand new story with these same characters. It was really fun. And
Parenting goals right there every
right,
night.
every night it was a different new story. But what ended up happening is we both became acutely aware of how brittle
Mhm.
the model was, how bad it was at actually kind of understanding what we wanted next. And actually, at one point, we were using Claude, and because that was my go-to for quite a long time, especially for creative writing. And then one time I put in a prompt, and the story that it generated, the dog died in the story, and I was like, that had nothing to do. And my daughter was upset, and I was like, this is crazy. It had run out of context in the window, right? So the context window is basically the chat window that you use in a single session with an AI chatbot. And there's a certain amount of text that you can put in and get out of that window. We call it the context window. And like basically they measure it in tokens. So Claude is able to do 200,000 tokens, which is, a token is like three-quarters of a word, a lot of words, but it ran out. And once it ran out, it lost coherence and started to kind of go kooky. And because of that, my daughter is now skeptical of AI and its abilities to kind of stay on task. And even though we switched to, Gemini, which has a 5 times the size of the context window, it kind of lost its magic for us. But she has also used it for creating images and just hearing her and seeing after the fact the different iterations that she would
Yep.
give. She's like, no, I want it to be like this now, or make it like
Mhm.
this now. No, make
Yeah.
it more like this. She kind of intuitively did that. But she's also like kind of over it. She's seen it do really bad at math, and we're like, let's try and come up with some math things using AI. And it failed really bad. And even though they're better at that now, they've been trained on more examples. She was skeptical. kids that are in an environment where maybe they have somebody like me in their house, maybe they're going to be like, all right, AI is actually not all that great. I should just do it myself. But eventually it's going to be in a world where it's too easy not to. And we're talking about this study before as an MIT study that came out that tested 59 college students writing an essay. They split the groups into three, and one group had access to ChatGPT, one had access to Google search, and one just used their brain. Yeah, the group that used ChatGPT had zero ability to recall a single quote or to really successfully synthesize any of the arguments in the essay. So um, what's happened is there's so much incentive to offload that hard thinking and that hard work that happens when you learn. Learning is not always fun. It's like working out. It's not always fun. And it's cliched, but the no pain, no gain thing really, it resonates when it comes to thinking deeply. I remember when I was in college and I was, having to read a lot of deep texts, and I was reading Kant and I just, it took me hours and hours and hours to pour over two paragraphs in this book to really unpack the idea. And I had this moment where it's sort of the understanding of it kind of flashed before my eyes. And then I kind of always had to try and find where that understanding was. It was very hard, but it was important for me to go through that process. And when you're using AI and having it not only summarize information, but also create what's supposed to be your thoughts that are synthesizing the ideas that you're supposed to be writing about, you're actually doing cognitive offloading. You're not doing thinking. You're, there's this argument now, and I argue that regular language models can't reason, but actually what they can do is they can get you to not reason as well. And that is really important to remember and really dangerous. We're going to have a real lack of expertise and mental rigor as part of the generations that are coming up now. They just don't have the ability to be away from AI systems in any meaningful way. There's going to be too much incentive to go, why don't I just tell you what this is about? Yeah, you want me to write it? I can write it. You okay? All right. See, it's good. And they'd be like, oh
Yeah,
yeah, I look what I wrote. You didn't write it, you didn't think about it, and that sucks. And I think everyone has done it. Everyone has, used AI to write something and been like, okay, this looks good, skimmed it, and then sent it and been like, well, wait, what was that about? Or have somebody ask them about it and be like, yeah, no, especially when AI first came out, it was too new. Oh, I just
absolutely.
gotta
I
write
was
it.
just gonna have 2 comments before I ask you for some, closing thoughts.
Hmm.
And when you talk about how brittle the models are, I do remember listening to a Wall Street Journal podcast called Learning AI about an OpenAI researcher saying that when she was a graduate student, she was training computers to write short stories. And inevitably, when the prompt was write a story, it somehow always ended up with a family buying a car. She said it didn't matter. But somehow that was the big event that was the highlight of the story was buying a car. So for whatever reason, it seemed to train that buying a car was like a big event and a big decision that was worthy of a plot.
Yeah,
And, so hopefully things have evolved a little bit, but it is still very brittle. So when you talk about running out of tokens because the dog died and they couldn't process anymore, it has a cold start problem. You come
yeah,
up with something out of the blue. So I
yeah.
totally agree with you on that. And then with regards to the MIT study and how the cognitive offloading is like working out, I remember many times in college when I would write essays on my computer and for whatever reason, the whole file disappeared and there'd be this midnight scream of disillusionment. But because I wrote it from scratch, I was able to rewrite it and
Yeah,
recreate because the recall is there because it was generated with your own brain cells. Whereas nowadays, if I write something with Claude or ChatGPT, you're right, I can't remember the details because I wasn't part of the authoring process. So I
yeah,
completely agree with you
yeah.
there as well. So, do you have any other closing thoughts about the state of AI? Maybe Fiji Simo is coming on this month as the new president of OpenAI's application, and she's written about how she thinks about AI ethics for the better of the world
Hmm.
and humanity. Given the brittleness and sort of the lack of reasoning and the long road ahead to artificial general intelligence, are you optimistic or pessimistic or sort of cautiously optimistic?
I mean, I am optimistic, very optimistic. I believe that even if, OpenAI doesn't create AGI or DeepMind doesn't create AGI or anything like that, there is a huge amount of excitement and talent thinking about how to make these systems really great. At the end of the day, I think that AI could help solve all diseases and could help mitigate or even reverse some of the damage to the environment. I think it could be used to make us really a lot better. It could free us to be really without any want, being sort of resource rich. And I mean, the possibilities are there. And if you scale up innovation, not the technology, but just the innovative thinking that's happening now, it could be transformative. And that's my hope. That's why I'm so focused on making sure people don't um, uh, jump the gun, because once it really is amazing, that's going to be reasons for celebration. But we're hearing a lot of false alarms right now, and people crying wolf about us being at that moment. But I think it's still incredibly exciting, and I can't now imagine the world without it. But people need to be really aware. Like, final, I guess, thought here. I have started a Substack, and I'm putting some of my thoughts in there, and it's not always sort of how to do this in your business. I'm thinking broader picture AI things. And one of the things I'm going to talk about is, and I'm going to publish this hopefully by the end of the day, is AI psychosis. So like be aware of the fact that these models, like we talked about at the beginning of the show here, um, are designed to kind of pump you up. And what's happening now all over is people are having these breaks with reality where they call AI psychosis, and they believe that the model is suddenly been unlocked and that it's sentient and that it's sharing these secrets about reality with them because they're one of the only people that could ever get it, almost godlike. And people are really having this break. And you start to see it on Twitter, and I'm seeing like on Reddit where people are going like all these different hieroglyphs and things like that. The reason I bring it up is I think it's really, that's the danger, is people are being really charmed by these systems, and they're great liars and they hallucinate. And so the high stakes use cases are still not there. And I think people need to start building, like you have a media literacy, figuring out what things are true or what's not in the media, and AI literacy around what the real challenges and dangers really are. I think people need to really think about that in the short term, and hold accountable governments and companies that are making these systems. Cause like, look, this could be amazing. For education, it could be great, but it could also take away our ability to reason, manipulate us into doing very dangerous things, losing breaks, breaking with reality, or sort of encourage our worst natures, right? And so that's the reality of that technology. It's hard to think of this as like a personal and a professional technology. It's an everything technology. So all the challenges that exist for the regular person out there exist even in a business context. And people need to understand that at this point, it's not a solved problem. It's worse than ever. And we need to think very carefully about the governance, how we use them. They're great for a lot of narrow tasks. And if you want, bring that AI in the loop, but just don't think it's going to change everything.
I think that's a great closing statement. Bring AI in the loop because
I can't
humans
read
are
that.
still non-negotiable and part of the equation. So with that, I want to thank you, Lee, for really talking in depth about some of the risks and opportunities of AI and helping us understand some of the use cases behind reinforced learning and some of the challenges of the brittleness of the model. So I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to people's comments on this and any of the other episodes. So talk
Great.
to you soon.
Thanks, Sunny.